Hello and welcome back to another episode on the Self Rule Podcast. I am your host, Hannah Holden, and this week I want to talk a little bit about self-love. Maybe you're listening and you find yourself on a self-love journey. Maybe what I'm saying is not resonating and you have no idea what I'm talking about. I remember that I've probably heard the term self-love for at least 5 years. But when I first heard it, it didn't really resonate with me because I didn't know how to relate to it yet. I think sometimes people go through something in life and it's kind of a defining moment that opens them up to the realization that, hey, I don't know if I actually love myself. And once people have that realization, it starts to unlock that self-love journey or that invitation to take a self-love journey. For me, this happened in 2019. Like I said, I had probably heard the term before that, maybe a little bit. But I remember when this first came up for me, I was attending a workshop that a friend was hosting, and it was a vision board workshop. And before we did the vision boards, she led a meditation. And I don't remember exactly what the question or prompt was, but it was something to the effect of, what's your focus for this year? Something like that. And I was sitting there, eyes closed, meditating, and I just heard this voice come through, and the voice said self-love. And it's so crazy how our intuition just knows these things when we give our intuition the space to answer. So the space, the stillness, and then prompting it with the right questions like that meditation did. And I was actually very surprised that that is what came through, because it's not like that was something that I was really thinking about much. So the fact that that came through so clearly was very surprising to me. And after we did the meditation, we made our vision boards. And I remember I put self-love in the very center of my vision board. That was the first time I had ever made a vision board. And I made that vision board and I hung it up that year. And so I was always seeing that reminder about self-love. And I think before that, I didn't really resonate with self-love because I didn't love myself and I didn't even know what that meant. I would say prior to that experience, there were a lot of years in my life where I was more externally oriented, meaning that I didn't have a relationship with myself. I didn't really have an inner world. The only inner world I really had was anxiety about my future, anxiety about my life, anxiety about, am I doing the right things? Am I pursuing the right path? But it was more of an anxiety, not a relationship where I was cultivating that inner wisdom, intuition, inner peace, all of that. It was more just like anxiety from my mind. That's what I guess my inner world was my mind, not my intuition. And for years, like I said, I was probably more externally directed. And I say that I didn't really know how to love myself because I didn't have a relationship with myself. I would say that my love for self was more conditional, and it was more conditional on how I felt about myself based on how I was quote unquote performing or living in the external world, not necessarily building some sort of inherent self-worth or value on my own. So it wasn't until I think not too long before I went to that workshop that I was just starting to do more self-discovery and exploration. And after I did that workshop and identified that, it really kind of opened me up to a self-love journey, which I've realized now will be for the rest of my life. So if that was 2019, it's 2025. It will be a forever journey. And it's a forever journey because once you have that awareness of, I need to love myself, or there's work here for me to do, you will realize that it is a practice. Self-love is a practice. I don't believe we ever just arrive. Don't get me wrong. I come across people where I'm like, wow, like they just radiate positive energy and they're so loving and they seem so confident and they love themselves. And probably some people think that about me, right? But even the people you see that are radiant and confident and self-assured and all of those things, it's still a practice. Loving yourself is a practice, and it's a practice through the daily habits that you have, the way that you talk to yourself, the way that you honor your desires, your boundaries, all of those things. So it's a practice, but I think sometimes what can be challenging with self-love is that there is a duality or a paradox when it comes to self-love. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So for me personally, there have been times where I have struggled to love myself in certain areas of my life because subconsciously I was scared that if I loved myself and accepted myself for who I was in that moment, that meant that I would stay there, I would be stuck there, and I wouldn't grow or change in the way that I wanted to. I think this keeps a lot of people stuck, and it keeps a lot of people from loving themselves because we are scared that if we love ourselves, that means we're saying we're okay the way we are, and therefore we lose hope on the possibility of becoming who we wish we were. That paradox is challenging, but it really holds people back. And I guess just to go a little deeper on this, I think the paradox here is the difference between option A. Option A is I will love myself when. I will love myself when I change. I will love myself when I lose weight. I will love myself when I have a relationship. I will love myself when I get married. I will love myself when I have kids. I will love myself when I have the job I want. I will love myself when I've healed from this, whatever, fill in the blank. I think these are some of the common ones that people experience, but it's this kind of postponing your self-love and your joy until you've arrived somewhere or you've achieved a certain milestone in life. And that is how we really separate ourselves from self-love and joy and even mindfulness and presence, because we are always creating new conditions for when we'll allow ourselves to be happy, when we'll allow ourselves to be lovable. And that right there, that energy is very striving, and it's very much rooted in conditional self-worth. Option number 2 is more like, I love myself enough to change. Very different energy. I love myself enough to change these things about myself. I love myself enough to change the patterns that aren't serving me. I love myself enough to change my physical fitness. I love myself enough to change the way I'm showing up at work, whatever. I love myself enough to be devoted to growth in this way. Very different energy. It's a I'm becoming energy. I love myself and I'm becoming a better version of myself because of it. But this is, like I said, that duality, and it keeps a lot of people stuck because we're so scared to love ourselves where we are, because we're scared that if we do that, then we're giving up on the person we want to be. We're giving up on the growth and the change that we desperately want. But the solution here is really to find a way to hold both, to hold the reality that I can love myself as I am right now and still want to change and still want to grow in this way. And that is where it's at. That is where you're going to close the gap. That is where you're going to close the gap between where you are and where you want to be. And the reason being that when we are stuck in that option 1 that I mentioned, where we're constantly putting off our joy, our happiness, our self-love until we've earned it, we'll never be enough for ourselves. We'll hit a milestone, and it still won't even change the way we feel. We'll hit that milestone, whatever it may be, relationships, anything. We'll hit a milestone and we still won't feel like we're enough. We still won't feel lovable, or we still won't feel whatever. It doesn't change the lack mentality that we have. And I think this does kind of come down to scarcity or lack, when we believe we have to accomplish something in order to be worthy of loving ourselves. It's very conditional, like I said. But because of that, when we set all these conditions, we're in that lack mentality. And that means that even when we achieve those things, we're still not satisfied or happy. So in order to feel the feeling we want to feel, so we think, okay, I'm going to achieve all these things so I can feel the feeling I want to feel. I want to feel loved. I want to feel worthy. I want to feel like I'm enough. We do the things in the hope that when we achieve them, we'll feel how we want to feel. We do the things and we don't feel how we want to feel, which means that it was never about achieving the thing. It was about feeling the feeling first. It was about feeling self-love first, using that as a foundation, and then building momentum on that to change, which, yes, of course, does increase our self-love because we can look at it and say, wow, like I loved myself enough that I was willing to put in the work. I love myself enough that I was willing to show up even when it was hard. I was willing to work on my relationship, or I was willing to spend time in the gym, or I was willing to overcome those limiting beliefs so that I could make that career move, whatever it is. So yes, your self-love can increase through milestones, but it's more through the inner process that you're going through of strengthening yourself, of loving yourself, of building internal confidence, all the growth that's happening internally while you're en route to the place you want to go. That is where you're going to be deriving the most reward from and the most self-love from. So, and of course you get the benefit of achieving things then, but you'll actually be able to enjoy them because you're not banking all your satisfaction, happiness, worth on having the thing. It was actually what you had to build up in yourself on the way there that makes it so rewarding. If you think about it, I don't know, I always like to use these analogies, like, you go buy something and it's just, let's say you go buy something just because you're thinking, oh, if I buy this new purse, it's going to make me feel sexy. And then you go buy the purse and you don't feel sexy because you never felt sexy to begin with. I mean, this sounds like such a silly example, but humans do this all the time. They buy things hoping it's going to give them a certain feeling. They buy the thing and it doesn't give them the feeling because they never had the feeling about themselves to begin with, or they never cultivated the feeling within themselves to begin with. So this really points to that it starts with the feelings. It starts with feeling love, feeling self-love, and then, okay, I feel self-love. I'm cultivating this decision to love myself where I am. But then what would a person who loves herself, what would she do? And then you are taking the actions and being devoted to the change you want to see. And that's where it's more meaningful. So there really is a duality, but what I would say is don't be afraid of loving yourself where you are. That is not what's going to keep you stuck or keep you from changing. What's going to keep you stuck and keep you from changing is banking all of your positive feeling on, oh, when I get there, I'll be happy. That's what's actually going to keep you from changing. I thoroughly believe that shame doesn't change people, love changes people. And it doesn't matter if it's changing yourself or changing other people. People don't change when they feel shamed. If you're shaming yourself about something in your life, it's not going to motivate you to change. It's not going to motivate sustainable change. If you're shaming someone in your life because you want them to change, it's not going to motivate sustainable change. If you love yourself and then therefore become devoted to yourself, you will change. So same thing with other people. So yes, this duality exists, but it's about being able to hold both. Hold the awareness that I am worthy of love right now, and because I love myself so much, I am going to change because it's what I want and it serves me. So I have a question for you. Where in your life are you withholding love from yourself until you arrive? Where in your life are you withholding love from yourself until you arrive? And then I guess the follow-up question I would ask you about that is, how can you love yourself where you are right now? And what actions can you take to be devoted to where you want to go? So said much simpler, how can you hold both? How can you love yourself where you are and lean into the change that you want to see? What does that look like? All right, I think that's what I've got for this week. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.